guys so very, very much. Today we have our very first podcast episode of the Iron Forge. This episode is geared specifically towards the health and wellness of the EMS community. I have with me Michael Bennett, who is the Director of Operations for Thousand Islands Emergency Rescue in Clayton. I have Lance Ronas, who is the Director of Operations for Indian River Ambulance Service in Philadelphia, New York. And then I also have Mr. Mark Deavers, who is the Director of Operations for Gouverneur Rescue to our north in St. Lawrence County. We are going to be discussing, in particular, the future of EMS in light of the change in the pandemic. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor and say, what things have we learned from EMS that we were doing things one way, and when COVID happened, there was a lot of hoops that we had to jump through to meet the demands on such a high level in such a short notice. What are some of the things that we saw that were different from before and after? I'll open this up. I'll just start with you, Mike, since I got you right there.
Oh, I do have to say, I think one of the things that EMS really thrives is being able to adapt and change in a very, very rapid fashion. During the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, we were getting changing guidance almost daily, and that all needed to be disseminated out. One of the things that's really helped us is embracing technology, the Zoom, all the online platforms. It allows us to get information out a lot quicker than the old bulletin board at the station used to be.
What was it about the changing of the rapidness and how often we were changing information? Why was that such a big impact?
As the best practices began to change from, avoiding advanced airway maneuvers to then going back and leaning towards advanced airway maneuvers with viral filters in place, a lot of the best guidance was all factored around provider safety. So we had to make sure to stay on top of that.
So I want to pose the same questions to you, Lance. What were your thoughts?
I think that the impact that it had for us was it was hard to keep up with all those changes. And so we had to provide efficiency in delivering our messages to our providers. Typically when there's a protocol change, and Mark and Mike can chime in, if there's any kind of adjustment to a protocol, it's here it's coming. Okay, now you can finally institute it. And these were, as of right now, this is what we're going to do. And it was hard to keep up with that. And what I was getting was the providers were getting frustrated as well because the changes were happening so fast. I couldn't remember am I supposed to do the advanced airway with the viral filter, or am I still supposed to avoid that and do the alternative airway, or what? And I think it provided us an efficiency of trying to deliver that information.
Mark, I'm going to bring that to you. How would you say that was changing?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we saw was trying to get people to be more proactive in using PPE, especially in the initial stages of this. Fortunately, for the most part, this virus was nowhere near as bad as it was predicted. There are people that get really, really sick off of it. And I think it's more challenging up here where we're not seeing huge amounts of really, really sick people from it, to keep provider diligence at decontamination and using the appropriate PPE. I'll also chime in a little bit on Lance's comment. The problem with this virus in a way is it's a novel virus, so it's new. We don't know anything about it. The changes that were coming out almost hourly in some cases, where they're saying, do this. Oh, no, just kidding. And from my position at the state and regional standpoint, it was even more frustrating than at the agency level, where we're trying to put together guidance to pass along to the agencies. And the guidance we were getting, we would finish a paragraph, have to delete it and rewrite the entire paragraph because the guidance literally changed in the course of a few hours. It's been a dynamic situation.
So it sounds like amongst all of you, it came across pretty much the same thing, that by how quickly the guidance was changing, it made it tough for EMS to shift and just get ahead of that tidal wave. What changes would you guys think moving forward would help improve that situation? We'll bring it right back to you, Mike.
Well, I definitely think a direct conduit to all providers from the region could be very beneficial. I know that we all share a lot of staff amongst agencies. And Mark, as you are releasing policies, I'm getting phone calls saying, hey, is this the same thing at Tiers? Well, it is. We're busy writing the policy, but I'll get it out to you as soon as I can. So I think that as we, especially with the current administration and Bureau of EMS and Trauma Systems, changes seem to be happening very, very rapidly that we haven't traditionally seen a pace like this in the past. Getting information disseminated to all providers at the same time, keeping everybody on the same page is going to be important.
Excellent. And to you, Lance.
Well, I think from my standpoint, I think that it will, by demonstration, show that we have an adaptability that a lot of medical providers don't have. I mean, in practice, when we're in the field, we have to adapt to our surroundings, and I think that through demonstration, we've actually shown that we can adapt to these changes real quick. And I think that our leaderships have shown that we're able to get these changes to our staffs. Our staffs are willing to and I'm ready to learn these new protocols and these new policies. I think that almost it's a good thing because we've been able to show that by example that we're able to adapt quickly and change. I think that'll be good for us in the long run.
Mark, how do you think that this is going to play out for moving forward?
I think the term EMS 2.0 is being discussed. I see a substantial change in the future of how we do business. And it's going to be challenging because in a lot of cases we're better served, and we were able to prove this, at a national level with this pandemic. We have as many capabilities outside of emergency medicine and more of a public health system, and working with partner agencies such as public health and the hospitals, et cetera, that we can have a much larger impact than just driving patients to the hospital. And I think that there's always going to be 911 and a need for emergency medical services, but I think globally, EMS as a whole is going to shift to a mobile healthcare concept. And a lot of this is a direct result of the pandemic.
As far as the mobile EMS, can you elaborate on your thoughts on how that will be different from what we're doing right now for those who might be listening who don't know exactly what's going on? So
community paramedicine / mobile integrated healthcare / mobile health, or whatever we want to call it, it's a community-oriented almost wellness program where EMS, there's several various forms of it in rural settings. Typically EMS partners with hospitals and doctors' offices in public health and goes out into patients' houses in a non-emergency setting, and for something like a viral pandemic, maybe does some testing or some follow-up, maybe going into a individual's house to evaluate for fall risks so they don't fall and break a hip, help them with their medications, do even lower level wellness exams, treating patients in place. A diabetic wake up is a great example of it. The programs are, the scope of it is almost limitless, especially as public health continues to struggle. They have more work and less people. A lot of counties have a public health nurse that goes out into a patient's house and they draw blood. And then they drive clear across the county and go to another patient's house and draw blood or weigh somebody. We have vehicles and we have staffing and people who can already do all of those procedures. I think that's a big possibility. And I also think we'll see a lot more treat in place kind of stuff going on in the future.
Lance, I know I've talked with you and I talked with Mike about this a little bit in the past, being that for those of you who don't know, Mark runs Gouverneur Rescue, which is kind of to our north. He's out in St. Louis County, so he kind of covers a big chunk of our northern section. And Mike, over at Tiers, covers, that'd be more of the western section of the county and out that way. And Indian River has more of an eastern side. And we kind of converge in the middle. So there's kind of a mutual aid amongst the three agencies that I have here today. And with that being said, and add to what Mark was saying about the mobile medicine, Lance, do you think this is where maybe we could look at a way to make integration or mutual aid from agency to agency a little easier? And if so, what ways would you think could this mobile medicine be incorporated with, as few growing pains as possible?
Well, I don't know if it'll make mutual aid any easier. I don't know if Mark or Mike disagree with that. Go ahead and chime in. I don't know if it'll make it any easier, and I don't know if it'll change the face of mutual aid. I think that it'll change our place in the communities that we serve. I think it'll majorly change, in Indian River, we only have one health clinic, and it's only open so many hours a day. And we are a long way from anywhere in our neck of the woods. So yeah, there's a public health nurse, as Mark said, that comes out, and she has, God only knows how many patients that she's got to attend to in the course of a week. And she might have to see a certain patient a couple of times a week. Whereas if we can work synergistically with public health and the education system to teach us more advanced assessments on particular modalities that we're not, as paramedics and EMS, we're taught how to do this quickly, boom, out, and get them to the hospital, as Mark said earlier. Now, let's teach these people the modalities so that they can leave the patient at home, converse with a physician if necessary, even to mild infections. Allow us to, through those physicians, write a script to get a prescription or to get a test or to go get a physical therapy assessment or something on behalf of that physician. I think that's where we're going to go, I believe. I believe that's where Mark was talking about, but I think that's more what we're going to be in line with doing, public health assessments. If you have a geriatric population that is large, we're going to be more embedded in there, making sure that they have proper railings, proper footing. If you start to see that there's a communicable disease moving into the little housing that we have, work with public health to make sure that infectious disease not go through the entire building. You know what I mean? I think that's where we're going.
Excellent. Thank you, Lance. Shifting over to you, Mike. Same question. And, are you kind of seeing the same way that Lance and Mark are seeing it, or do you see things a little bit different on your end? I know Clayton is a little bit different population. So does that affect you differently over there on the west side?
No, I'm right on board with where Lance and Mark are. I think that's the direction we're heading in. And realistically, we may have a little bit different payer mix in the Thousand Islands region, but we still have the same patients with the same problems, and the same public health is just as overwhelmed here as it is over in Lance's bubble. I do think that, especially because of this pandemic, in the overall healthcare field, they have done a lot with telemedicine and telephone encounters for providers. And I really think that's someplace that EMS would fit in very nicely, is an extension of their primary care physician or the public health physician, whoever we're working on behalf of, to be able to get them face-to-face time via telemed and also be available right there at the patient's side for any diagnostic testing, vital signs monitoring, whatever they want done. We're right there. We can get it done and over with and maybe keep that patient out of the hospital or out of their primary office. As point-of-care testing becomes more and more readily available, it may be flu swabs. It may be the 15-minute quick lab tests. They make similar to a glucometer. You can get a full med panel and have results in 10 minutes right there. Consult with a physician, adjust medications as necessary. I really think there's a lot of potential.
With that being said, it sounds like for the most part, the three of you guys are in agreement with that would be a viable option or direction to take the future of EMS. It sounds to me that this would require the scope of practice of the paramedic and the EMT to grow it to some degree, so that to give you guys the ability to do more treat in place. Would you guys agree with that? And if not, why would you not?
Mobile health program or community paramedicine program or whatever verbiage we want to use, I think it's specific to the community and it's meeting the needs of that specific community. And we all have a similar vision, but if we were all to roll out a plan tomorrow, there would be differences based off of what's needed. it may or may not lead to a scope of practice change. A lot of the skills, fundamental skills, we already have. And with the advances in technology and the wonderful abilities that telehealth brings to it, while there would be advanced training and some different credentialing and stuff, I'm sure, as far as a true scope of practice change, I don't see a humongous change in scope of practice as much as a change in business model.
Excellent. Thank you. Lance, what do you think?
I think that there will be a mild scope of practice change, because now, we are designated technicians. Although Mark and Mike and you, we all know that we're more clinicians than technicians. I think that we will have to learn more laboratory type work. And I think that will adjust our scope a little bit. Mark, Mike, if you disagree, then chime in. But I think that we will have to adjust to be more laboratory technicians. Again, we're the person that goes, we have all the emergency department experience, a little clinical experience. We have a little of this experience. They're just going to add a little bit more on, laboratory assessments, joint manipulation assessments. So we're going to be almost a physical therapist, almost this, almost that. We're almost a lot of things, but we're not quite there. You know what I mean? So I think there will be a slight adjustment to the scope of practice for us. And I think with that, there also has to be an adjustment with our educational requirements for people to become EMTs or paramedics.
And I don't think you've chimed in on this yet, Mike. So what do you think? Are you in agreement with Mark and Lance, or what do you have to say?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same boat with these guys. There's going to be maybe a mild scope of practice change, but the skill set is already there. It's really just a matter of how we are utilizing it in a non-emergency setting to be able to assist these patients. And I mean, there's a lot of things that we could be doing that we can freshen up on. I mean, there's not every day you do a joint assessment on somebody. It's good, gives us an opportunity to get hands-on time, but I do think there's going to be a training component. Some of that's going to have to be a little bit more in-depth view of the nursing model, being we are very technician-based, we're very clinician-based. The nursing model is something a little bit different, and if we're going to be interfacing with physicians, we need to be able to give them what they're used to dealing with in a little bit different format. All
right, awesome. So if I'm hearing correctly, I'm going to paraphrase correct, right? So the idea isn't so much that the scope of what the paramedic or EMT is necessarily have to grow. It's just the manner in which we're able to collect data and really maybe single out the truly emergency cases from the ones that truly need to be brought into the hospital to be seen, from the ones that can be, hey, here's what's going on, get with your doctor online, talk to them about what we've discovered here today, and separate that demographic. Did I get that correctly? Would you guys agree with that, more or less? Go ahead, Lance.
I think that we're going to be serving two masters ultimately, because we still have to do and provide what we're best at, which is 911 emergency care. That we have to be able to do that. Some of our work's going to become appointment-based. Public health has called us and said that there's a patient, 70, just came home from the hospital, lives at such and such an address. Can you go out at such and such a time or to do a medical update as far as making sure their Lasix is working? That kind of stuff. And do a blood draw because we need to make sure that they're not becoming hypokalemic. That kind of thing. So we'll be serving two masters, and that's why I think there'll be a subtle adjustment to our scope of practice.
What we're saying was that to serve two masters, it seems like we would need to grow our body of providers. And what would be the best manner that we could do that and still be, Johnny on the spot for that e-call that nobody plans for, and still be able to support the doctors and the hospital staff on taking care of some of the more rudimentary calls and kind of be, I guess it'd be more of an on-call quick med, would you say?
I think I don't know how Mike and Mark staff their agencies. For us, typically there's only 2 people here at any given time. If you are doing more of the home-based care, but still need to fulfill your 911 obligations, then it will, we'll have to have a different staffing. We'll have to have one that'll be doing the home-based runs versus those that are doing the 911 calls. So there'll be a level of staffing. So that means, of course, there'll have to be a little bit of adjustment to funding. I think that when somebody goes into a paramedicine school, they will realize that they will be learning the components to do both jobs. You know what I mean? So it may take some of the sexiness away from just being a paramedic, where you're running out and grabbing people from car wrecks and doing the diff breathers and all that, to you're going to be going in and you're going to do a blood draw to make sure somebody's Lasix is working well. It takes some of the sexiness away, but the feeling that you're serving people will certainly still be there. So people that get into serve, it's a different face of a medicine for them, I think.
Excellent, awesome. That brings me to something else. But before I go there, I'm gonna open this up to Mark and see what Mark has to say about that same situation. Go ahead, Mark.
Again, it depends on how the model looks. I'll pick on Fluff for an example. In the middle of the winter, he may not need extra staffing to go draw a set of labs because nobody calls 911 in Clayton after Labor Day. That being said, in the middle of the summer, he may need a substantial increase in staffing because everybody calls 911 in Clayton between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So it's what the program, what the volume of the program would look like. If public health is calling up every morning and saying, hey, I need you to go draw somebody's lab work or go weigh one person, to put extra staffing on isn't really necessary. But if public health is calling up every morning and saying, hey, we need you to go draw labs on 15 people, then I got to buy a car and and employ more people or increase hours.
Okay, excellent. And then for those of you listening, to kind of expand on what Mark was saying about Clayton and tiers, is there's over on that side of the county, we have a lot more snowbirds. So some of the call volume drops a little bit because we have the snowbirds that go out there. So the dynamic of the type of e-calls we get on that western side of the county changes depending on the season. So with that being said, Mike, I'm going to bring that to you. What do you think?
I think Mark has hit the nail on the head. It's going to be a matter of what the model looks like. And from that point, we're going to have to build the staffing model to support it. That being said, we're also sort of operating under the assumption that we're staying in our little fiefdom. I'm just going to be in Clayton and Orleans. Mark's going to stay in Gouverneur, and Lance is going to stay over in Philly. It may not work like that. We're outside of Article 30 right now. CON laws don't really apply to what we're talking about currently. So this may be something that goes past the boundaries of our own little backyard. And if Lance doesn't have a crew on for community paramedicine, I may be over at his housing unit drawing blood. It's just going to depend on what the demand is, what's happening, and how we're gonna best fill the need.
And do we require every agency to be able to do this? Do we require that they do community paramedicine? That's a question that needs to be thought of as well.
You hit the nail on the head 100%. Is this going to be the standard that we're all held to statewide, or is this going to be a above and beyond certification that the agency has the opportunity to participate in if they want to?
See, I think that creates, and this is something that I didn't think about until you guys just mentioned that. I think that is a very interesting situation if this goes forward, because on e-calls, I know there's been times when I'm running with Indian River and we get out so far and I'm BLS, I need ALS support, and I know I've had tiers meet me, come over to my side to give me ALS support depending on the type of call we have. And I know that we've had some mutual aid responsibilities between Indian River and Gouverneur and so forth. And so on those aspects, I know there's a lot of one hand washes the other aspect going on. I would think that as far as if we're doing the community medicine aspect, allowing each other to kind of cross the railroad tracks per se, and to help out each other would, in the long run, benefit the communities as a whole. But now would that require a change? And I know we talked about the way the dynamic of the staffing is going to look, but what about if, like for myself, I run for more than one agency, which a lot of us do. How would that affect the way we people like me, would we be able to exchange, employees? How could we make this more of a seamless or exchange thing as far as on a worker base, not necessarily just the big picture paperwork, but for the individual who's being called out to go to these places?
That is a great question that none of us have the answer to. Our ability to operate is through regulation. What our capabilities are and what we will be totally allowed to do at the final end of it is going to come down to the various state governing agencies and even some federal guidance. We can talk about our ideas and what we see coming, but to lay much more than that out as far as a plan, I think is difficult. That being said, I do think there will be some consistency, because we have to have a program that trains somebody how to go out and do a joint assessment or a much more advanced assessment. And with that, it's a credentialing process, I would assume. The nuances at the agency level may be a little different, but I think there's going to be consistency in rural mobile health programs throughout the state and throughout the country.
Lance, you want to say something about that?
These models will be presented to the governing bodies. I think that when they go to make a change, because they have seen the evidence of EMS, more so in New York City, where there's been hotspots to the COVID stuff. But they've seen the ability of EMS. I think that it's made the state, other than just DOH and Bureau of EMS, I think that they have seen the value of having strong emergency medicine. Now we need to show them and start working with the governing bodies to change it to not just emergency medicine, but chronic medicine as well. That's going to be it's going to be hard. There will be consistency. There'll have to be consistencies, as Mark said, with educational platforms, with equipment platforms and such. But that's stuff that we're dreaming of right now, that somebody's going to tell us, yes, you can now go and do this, and it takes a long time for those changes to occur.
Okay, awesome. And Mike, what do you got to add to that, if anything?
Not much. These guys hit the nail right on the head.
Awesome. Okay, so we're just about winding down. I don't want to run too long on this one, but I do want to pose this to the three of you. Maybe the scope of practice for the paramedic may not change, but do you think the scope of practice for the EMT would change to where the EMT would be able to be maybe blessed a broader range of things they can do? Because I know currently, like finger sticks is agency specific, right? If the agency goes through certain credentialing, then the EMTs are allowed to do finger sticks. If they don't, then they can't. Do you think there would be something that may allow the EMT to be able to do a little bit more, maybe be able to read, basic EKGs, be able to do capnography if need be? And I'm just throwing out stuff, but you guys see where I'm going with the question. So since I got you on the hook, Mike, you go first.
So yeah, I certainly can see where EMTs can be utilized, especially in getting 3-lead or 12-lead EKG readings, transmitting those into a cardiologist or a primary care setting. There's in other areas in the state, it's already happening. So just be a little bit of additional training. I don't think you would actively be interpreting the data, but as far as just gathering that and transmitting it, it's certainly a possibility.
We'll flip over to Mark. What do you think, Mark?
I think that we're going to see a slow, expanded scope of basic EMTs, not just from the community paramedicine or mobile healthcare projects, but in other ways to address some other issues moving forward.
Excellent, awesome. And Lance?
Well, I would like to think that we would. I don't see it too much different than what we're currently allowed right now, simply because of the limitations of the education of a basic versus a paramedic. if the state and the prospective student is willing to expand their education to become an EMT, then I think that certainly there will be an expansion of their abilities and their scope. But until that platform changes, until those changes were to ensue, and I think that they're going to be relatively limited. It would have to be a substantial change to their education because they need to understand more of the pathophysiologies of the things that they're doing. So
the education portion, when they're going through the EMT course, would have to be expanded to match the greater knowledge base that they would require out in the field. Now, let me pose this to you. Do you think that you have your basic EMT course, and then because you guys earlier mentioned how the mobile community medicine would be area specific, so do you think that it would be possible that you would have your basic EMT course, but then you could have follow-on courses that are held at the agency level, conducted by CIC, to the needs that are specific to that community in which we train in? What are your thoughts on that, Lance?
Absolutely. It's similar to the albuterol or whatever the agency wants for their basics. Here certainly we only have 2 senior housings. They're very small senior housings, but an expansion on their geriatric ability. To understand the geriatric patient a bit more. Going into their homes and recognizing certain things within the home. Certainly, I can see that being something that would be more localized. It depends on, as you said, we have 6 of the Indian River schools here, and there's a lot of athletics here. And at any given time, there might be 4 soccer games, going on, and 2 football games, and all that kind of stuff happening in the district. And so certainly maybe they need to learn more joint manipulation, assessments, so it could be very localized. Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome. So Mike, what are your thoughts on that aspect as far as regarding the increasing scope of practice for the EMT, or like we were just discussing, maybe leaving the course the way it is and then just adding follow-on courses at the agency level to help bridge that gap?
I certainly think this is going to be an additional education component as opposed to rolling it in with the EMT course, because we still have a primary mission. So that education needs to be focused on our primary mission. This is something that's going to be above and beyond that. Optional participation. I don't see the scope changing substantially for EMTs as a result of this, but I also can see, depending on how the model is built, where EMTs would definitely have a place. They wouldn't be excluded. This wouldn't be a paramedic only thing. There's no reason you can't go over and do a follow-up healthy assessment or go to a joint assessment on somebody who's just got a new hip. That's well within the existing scope, and it doesn't require a paramedic to go do that.
And I assume, Mark, you're kind of the same boat as Lance and Mike?
My question is, and it was touched on a little bit earlier, is this an all or nothing? When you get at a much larger global issue, a lot of this concept came about a decade ago as a way for different revenue streams for some of the larger ambulance services to help with ER overcrowding and everything else. And what it's shown is that we can actually reduce the cost of healthcare. And the big question in how any level of education is going to look and whether or not everyone's going to be doing this, if Medicare believes that they can save hundreds of millions of dollars a year by requiring every EMS service that participates with Medicare and Medicaid to do this, it may be an all or nothing, which then would probably change the EMT curriculum. In the immediate future, I see it as more of a localized post-initial education add-on training program similar to ACLS or PALS.
All right, so we're just about out of time. I don't want to run too far over, so I want to say thank you to the three of you for for being on the show and to opening up a lot of room for thought for the EMS community, as for the individual, and hopefully for those of you who are listening in who aren't part of the emergency medicine world, you kind of give you an idea of what's actually happening, that we're not just an ambulance that appears from the Starship Enterprises and beams down in front of your house. That there's a lot of logistics that goes into trying to deliver the highest quality of healthcare for each and every one of you, and to help the hospital. So stay tuned. In the future episodes, we'll talk more about how we can further ease the burden on the hospitals, because I'm sure anybody who's been watching everything since this pandemic, big talk is hospital overcrowding and things along those lines. So those are something for the future services. So again, Mike, Lance, and Mark, thank you guys very much. I'm gonna go through each one of you, and see if you have any closing statements, and if not, we'll kind of close it from here. So I'll start with you, Mark. With you, Mike.
Nope, nothing to add. I think it was a good discussion. We covered a lot of ground pretty quickly, and thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And Lance.
Well, I appreciate you having this, Ruben. I think it's been wonderful. I wish you'd give me more than an hour notice so that I would wear something else than this. And then I want to know what the hell that picture is over top of Mark's shoulder. So, that's about it. This has been good. Thank you.
And go ahead, Mark.
Just thanks for the invite. I really appreciate the opportunity. This has been great. And thank you for wearing a Gouverneur rescue shirt.
Yeah, I figured you'd get a kick out of that one. little plug for the agency. All right, you guys, thank you very much. I hope you guys have a fantastic day.